Yeah, baby. Woo! Woo! Richmond's back in 9th and I couldn't give a fuck because we won. Woo! Oh, hang on. Hello? What? Wait, what? Richmond's under investigation? For murder? Who'd they murder? West Coast? What is going on, YouTube universe? This is ArghGodzirra. Welcome to another video of AFL tips and predictions. We are looking ahead this round to round number 8, and we're going to reflect on the round that was round number 7. But before we get started, we got to get the tedious out of the way. If you want to join my competition, it's still time. It is open to all of you. There is a URL and a competition code on the screen right now. You will find that in the description of this video. Go click on it. Go join the competition. Come and have some fun. But let's have a look at how the tips went down for round 7. And as you can see here, we started off strong. Now, I, at one point, had Richmond by, I think it was 34 or 36 points. And I turned around and said, whoa, I'm not that confident. 109 points, if you don't mind. It was a huge win, and even though a lot of people are saying, oh, they only beat West Coast, and I know there's a few of you, my old man's one of them, I still take a lot out of this game. Richmond started playing a Richmond brand again, the brand that won them 3 premierships in the last 5 years. It was great to watch, and I think it could be the kickstart we needed. Being played back into form like that, especially coming up against clubs like Collingwood and Essendon in a couple of weeks that are really winnable games, Richmond can really turn their season around. We'll get to the Collingwood game momentarily, but to kick the round off, not only with a correct tip, but with your own team winning by over 100 points, it was beautiful. Then, GMHBA Stadium, we had what ended up probably being game of the round. Fremantle defeated Geelong in Geelong. I said last week when I made the tip of Geelong that I wasn't discrediting Fremantle at all by making that selection, and said that if Fremantle lost, they would take a lot out of that game. Well, they took a hell of a lot more out of that game because they took the win, and you don't often see Geelong bested on their home ground. Given Fremantle had a bigger lead at one point and Geelong managed to chip away, just the composure for Fremantle to hold on strong, especially in the dying moments of that game, are a huge credit to this team. And who would have thought going into 2022 that Fremantle would be playing a brand of football that would make them worthy of being a top 4 team? Currently, in my opinion, they are well seated within that top 4 in the competition, along with Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. My opinion, feel free to argue it, but they looked very impressive at GMHBA Stadium. Then down at Adelaide Oval, we had a bit of a slip-up because we backed Adelaide and GWS came out and fucking smacked them. And I didn't expect this to come, especially Adelaide scalping Richmond and the Bulldogs back-to-back. I would have thought that they would have done a number on GWS. I was wrong. That doesn't knock Crom's season off of the rails at all, but it was a much needed win that GWS needed because they were starting to go downhill real quick. I don't understand why so many people are saying Leon Cameron and his job at GWS is under the most pressure. You've got West Coast Eagles, who I know they're suffering from COVID and everything else, don't get me wrong, but the rest of the competition was suffering from COVID for the last couple of years. But seeing how far teams like West Coast and Port Adelaide have fallen, you would have thought Adam Simpson and Ken Hinkley would have had their jobs under scrutiny a lot faster than old mate down at GWS. But hey, they're calling for his head. He got a big win. Hopefully it gets their season back on track. Melbourne took on Hawthorn. I tipped Melbourne, but found myself really rooting for Hawthorn by the end of this game. They showed a lot against Melbourne. They showed Melbourne is not this invincible force that the media are making them out to be. Every team is beatable. Hawthorn so far have been the closest to almost cracking that code. But some would argue Melbourne were missing some key players, Luke Jackson probably being one of the biggest. And Melbourne could have won potentially by a hell of a lot more had they had those players in. But that's all in hindsight. They got the job done, but credit where credit's due. Hawthorn looked very impressive on the weekend. Kazali Stadium saw a thriller of a game. The most thrilling game of football I have ever seen in my life. We had St Kilda take on Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide winning by a point. But if you saw the final scoreline, it was one of the most inaccurate games of football you would ever sit down to watch. So much so that the final scoreline, as you can see on screen, was 4 goals 18, defeated by 5 goals 13. It was almost like watching a game of the Western Bulldogs play against the Western Bulldogs. But I tipped St Kilda. Port Adelaide came out and held out strong enough to win the game. And in hindsight, either side could have won by 4, 5, 6 goals, but at the end of the day, you take what happened on the day, and Port Adelaide walk away with their second win of the season, further demonstrating what I said about St Kilda a couple of weeks ago when they start playing some teams that have been more consistent over the past couple of seasons. Would they be able to hold up? And even though Port Adelaide up until this point had only won the one game, Port Adelaide showed that St Kilda can be broken down just like every other team can. Marvel Stadium. This game was very competitive for a long time. Carlton defeated North Melbourne by a sizable margin in the end, but it was only a couple of goals here or there up until half-time, and then after that it was curtains for North Melbourne. But thankfully, Richmond did the job on West Coast, so North Melbourne fans, you're welcome, you're off the bottom of the ladder. And West Coast, I believe, fact check me if you'd like, but I believe this is the first time the West Coast have ever been dead last on the bottom of the ladder in their history. In their history. MCG, Collingwood defeated the Gold Coast as we assumed they would. Bulldogs doing a number on Essendon as we assumed they would. And then Brisbane. I turned around and said that it was something like 9 or 10 years since they had beaten Sydney in Sydney, but this would be the year because Sydney, unfortunately, have been leaving doors open. This game right here, Lance Franklin kicked 6 goals straight for Sydney and they still lost. Normally when Lance kicks a bag, they have the game locked up, but they still lost this. The biggest draw to come out of this, however, Joe Daniher is now sidelined for 4 to 6 weeks with a shoulder injury, which is a shame. Even though I joke about Joe Daniher, he has been really consistent the past 2 years at Brisbane, and it's never good to see a player go down with injury, regardless of what that injury is. So that gave me 6 out of 9 for the round. 7 was the most tipped this round, and those that tipped 7, there was only 4 of them. We have Sean C, my old man. We got Michael S, the sheepdog himself, Tyson G, and Daniel C, all tipping 7. So congratulations to the 4 of you for tipping the most correct this week. When we go to total tips, it's starting to really shake up the top. Courtney K still holding the competition down on top, but she is tied again with Kirk G. Snipping on their heels, just 2 tips behind. We have Sean A, Sean C, myself, and Shannon H. And then not long, behind us, we've got a ton of people on 42, couple on 41, couple on 40. The competition is still well and truly open, but again, congratulations to both Courtney and Kirk for holding the competition down overall for 2022. Now that we've got that out of the way, it is time to get our tips in this week. And there has been some big announcements go down already, so we'll cover that as well. And what I'm going to do for the first time in this video is we're actually going to boot up the AFL website, and we're going to have some updates here because it's worth noting some of these once we go into our tips. First game, Adelaide Oval, Friday night. We have Port Adelaide taking on the Bulldogs, and Bulldogs only go in as a slight favourite. This is a very hard game to pick for me. I am going to back Port Adelaide here, only because I think now that they've got a little bit of momentum behind them and being at home, they could get up and win. The Bulldogs, we know they've been swaying a little bit this year. Once the teams get released tonight and I know who is and isn't playing, I might make a more more bolder approach to this game, and I might change my tip to the Bulldogs, but I think Port Adelaide here could be one of those tips where a lot of people are going to back the Bulldogs, so getting in on Port Adelaide might give me an edge. That's also why I'm going to go Port Adelaide, hoping that majority of you guys in the competition go the Bulldogs and I can get a 1-up. Friday night, Fremantle taking on North Melbourne up at Optus. We're going to lock in Fremantle. It's a done and dusted game here. There's a reason North Melbourne going at $7.50. Fremantle just further cementing a top 4 spot with this win. Quite comfortably. Should get it done, I'm going to say by 7 or 8 goals. Big call, maybe, but Fremantle's been doing what they do best all year, and that's playing consistent football, playing, premiership style football. Probably the most Melbourne-like team that is out of Melbourne is Fremantle, in the way that they're both playing a similar game, which, not to brag, but it's a Richmond style game. The handball and run game that Richmond did for the past 5 years, other teams are now executing it a hell of a lot better, and it's getting them on top of the competition. And Fremantle and Melbourne are two of those teams that are executing the handball, the run and carry game so well, and it has them firmly sitting on top of the ladder for a reason. So they should comfortably win against North Melbourne. Saturday night at the MCG, Richmond taking on Collingwood. I was going to be backing Richmond anyway, because I think, as I said, the 109-point win is going to be a big momentum boost to Richmond. Collingwood were already going into this game without Brodie Grundy in the ruck, who has historically monstered Richmond in every clash that we've had, regardless of whether we've won or lost. They've got no Jamie Elliott up forward, who before his injury was extremely accurate on goal and was an X-factor for them. But the reports today, ladies and gentlemen, are one that need to be seen to be believed, because illness has ran rampant over at Collingwood, and there are a few players who were missing from the main training session ahead of the Richmond game, putting some doubt over whether they'll play or not, because 2 players last week missed because of a gastric bug, and those 2 players were Jordan De Goey and Will Hoskin-Elliott. This week, NAB Rising Star favourite Nick Dacos, you can see it on the screen, Vice Captain Taylor Adams, Braden Maynard, and young Reef McInnes were all not in attendance. Now, Braden Maynard anyway suffered an injury to his hand that had his hand severely swollen, so I was counting on him being dropped this week due to injury anyway. But losing Nick Dacos, even though it be his 8th game of football, he has been very influential off of that half-back line for Collingwood. Losing Taylor Adams takes out one of their best clearance players in the midfield, which is an area that we know historically Richmond suffer in. So the Magpies of fate, they're hopeful that they'll get up and win, but a 6-day break and then that gastric bug going around, I don't know whether they're going to get up or not. And the bigger story here, 4 hours ago, it has been confirmed Dustin Martin will be returning this Saturday night against Collingwood. I am so glad that he is back after 6 weeks away from the game, doing whatever he needs to do to get himself right again. He is back home, and hopefully he is going to put on a hell of a show Saturday night. I am so excited to sit back and watch this game. But I'm backing Richmond, obviously, for many reasons. The SCG sees Sydney taking on the Gold Coast. Sydney are going to win this one. Not discrediting the Gold Coast, because the Gold Coast in patches have shown that they can compete with most teams in the competition, but Sydney has been one of the elite teams this year, despite their loss to Brisbane. I mean, they're going to lose to elite clubs. It's plain and simple. But Sydney are a real premiership threat this year, I feel. They're going to be a top 4 threat as well, and they're going to get their season back on track after a minus obstacle against Brisbane last week. Canberra Oval, GWS taking on Geelong. I'm going to go Geelong, even though GWS came off of a monster win against Adelaide. Geelong with a minor loss against Fremantle. I think Geelong are going to restructure a couple of things. I know GWS have beaten Geelong a couple of times in the past couple of seasons, so that kind of makes this tip a little bit shaky. And you probably could go GWS here if you wanted a good point of difference, but I think Geelong bounce back. And I think, again, without Phil Davis in that defensive structure, I feel that's going to leave the gate open for either one of Hawkins or Jeremy Cameron to get off the chain. And Cameron was very quiet last week. You don't normally see Cameron go back-to-back weeks very quiet. So he could have a big day out against his former side. Later that night, Essendon takes on Hawthorn. We are backing in Hawthorn. It has been confirmed that Jake Stringer will now be out for a couple more weeks with another problematic hamstring, which is a shame. A lot of people, the media were drumming Stringer up all preseason saying he's the number one rated player in the competition. I don't know where they got that information from, because I think I would comfortably name 30 or 40 players ahead of Jake Stringer when it comes to the number one elite talent. But Hawthorn last week against Melbourne showed that they have capabilities, even with a young team, to play finals football. Big call, maybe, but I think they do a number on Essendon this week, and that will put them firmly in the hunt for a top 8 spot. Normally, around rounds 8 to 12, that's where the final 8 teams really take shape, and not much, configuration happens outside of that. So, if Hawthorn want to play finals in 2022, this is a must-win game for them. Essendon just have a lot of shit going on. People are calling for a internal inquiry into the club. Players are upset. A lot of people tipped Essendon to play finals this year. Mick Malthouse came out and said they were going to win the flag, for fuck's sake. So, I don't know what's going to give with Essendon, but Hawthorn, I think, quite comfortably win this game. Saturday night at the Gabba rounds out with Brisbane taking on West Coast. There is a reason West Coast are $15 for this win. We're going to lock in Brisbane. If they don't win this by over 100 points, there is something wrong. There are a number of reasons why I say this. Adam Simpson, the coach, has entered into safety protocols for COVID, so Matthew Knights will be taking over. They only have 22 players available to be selected for this game. So from what I have been able to find out for you guys is that was including debutant Greg Clark last week, who had a great game against Richmond, being put into protocols as well. So they are unable to meet the minimum requirement of 3 AFL listed players, and they have forced a waffle game to be postponed, because in the waffle there is a competition rule where there has to be 3 AFL listed players playing in that team. This is something that I've actually only just found out, and due to the availability of players for West Coast senior side, they've had to postpone this waffle game because there's not enough players to field them. And then you've got the fact that West Coast are struggling so much that they're now going to have to call again on players from the waffle to come up and fill some spots. I really feel for them. I do. And a lot of people are saying that the integrity of the AFL has gone out the window, because this will be the second time this year that West Coast have been in this position where they've had to borrow players from the waffle because they don't have enough players on their own list. I feel for them on that front, and I do. My opinion is, if Western Australia had opened up their borders when the rest of Australia did, and didn't keep Western Australia in lockdown for as long as they did, then they wouldn't be getting hit as hard with all this COVID stuff, because if you haven't seen, we might only be getting maybe 2 or 3 players a week going into safety protocols, if we're lucky, over the rest of Australia. We've got, on a weekly basis, with West Coast and Fremantle in some cases, so many players not being able to play because they have to lock down because of COVID. I think the Western Australian government backed them into a corner, which sucks. Do they postpone this game? I don't think they do, because of the fact that they played the other one earlier this year. A lot of West Coast supporters are going to say that this year, the competition was compromised against them, and that's why they're going to finish on the bottom and everything else. We'll hear it endlessly. To some degree, there is a lot of merit to that. I don't know. It's a messy situation, and it's only going to get messier when Brisbane flog them this week. Melbourne takes on St Kilda on Sunday. We're going to lock in Melbourne. I don't think St Kilda is the team to defeat Melbourne. However, they do have the outside and inside pace to match Melbourne. So if they can win the the running game, if they can get their running game flowing a hell of a lot better than Melbourne can, then maybe they can provide that upset. You've got Max King, who's been struggling up forward, but when you've got the likes of Dan Butler, Jack Higgins, those type of players crumbing the ground ball, if Max King can just bring the ball to ground, I think St Kilda have the edge up forward. So the more I talk about this game, the more I'm actually talking myself into thinking St Kilda could beat Melbourne. I don't think they will, and I'm firmly backing Melbourne, but at this point, it's just a question of who is going to knock Melbourne off their perch. In the final game of the round, Carlton takes on Crom. I'm going Carlton. Big story out of Carlton, Mitch McGovern, who had turned his season around from being a hapless forward to a pretty solid defender. He's out for 10 to 12 with an injury. Again, upsetting to see players go down. But I still think the brand Carlton are playing has been more consistent than Adelaide. I think Adelaide in places have played a more exciting brand. Both these teams here vying for a top 8 spot. Carlton goes further to cementing a spot a little bit further. Adelaide get their season back on track if they win, but I think Carlton get the job done. So reflecting, we're going with Port Adelaide with a possible change. Fremantle, Richmond, Sydney, Geelong, Hawthorn, Brisbane, Melbourne, and Carlton. That's it for another round of tips and predictions. Hopefully I can make some movements this week with tipping some teams like Port Adelaide. And they can get the job done against teams like the Bulldogs. But hey, we've seen weird shit go down all season this season, so I wouldn't put it past a team like Port Adelaide to come out and win that game. Thank you for checking out another video of mine. I do appreciate you being here. I appreciate all the support you give myself as well. So if you don't mind, feel free to leave a like on the video. Subscribe to my channel if you're new. As I said at the top of the video, check the description down below. URL will take you to the competition. All you have to do is sign up if you haven't already. It is free to play. Lock yourself in. Let's get the ball rolling. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here. Good luck to your teams this weekend. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.